Joe! I don't know where he's gone. Joe? Yeah, let's have a look in here. Joe, what are you doing? No time to nap. Come on, man.
Where am I?
It's M5 Touring shoe.
It's real! Oh my goodness. Wow. Hey guys, welcome to my first look video on BMW's brand new G99 M5 Touring. Hopefully you've seen my first drive video on the saloon version of this that I filmed a couple of months ago out in beautiful but slightly damp Austria. If you missed it, there'll be a link to that video in the description below. I knew before jumping into the saloon it weighed just over 2.4 tons, yet when I took it out around the beautiful Salzburg ring, it didn't feel anywhere near that, and its capabilities were incredible. During that first drive event, I guessed that the saloon would retail at about £130,000. I was actually very wrong. But thankfully, I was very wrong in a good way, because I've just heard the announced price for the saloon that is now out as you're watching this video, and it's going to retail at £110,500 plus on roads. So I reckon this is going to be a couple of grand more than that, probably 112, 113 grand plus on roads, meaning it does actually represent very good value in today's world of overinflated car prices. Taking those prices into consideration, how does that mean this fares against its rivals? I think one of its biggest rivals are actually within the BMW group itself, the M3 Touring, and BMW have recently facelifted that car, and they start at £88,000 on the road. So there's going to be about a 25 grand difference between the two cars, but obviously this has got a lot more going on under the skin. It's a plug-in hybrid, which we'll get to a bit later. It's larger, it's more powerful, it's an M5, it's not an M3, but there is still quite a big price difference between those two. Then we need to turn to Audi and their RS6 Performance, because that's the only version of the RS6 you can buy. It is an aging car now, but it's still a brilliant car and one of my absolute favorites. And a base RS6 Performance today is £116,000. That's a base one. And going off recent times, BMW M tend to put more standard equipment in their base cars. So it's going to be a bit cheaper, and it's probably going to have a bit more standard equipment. So things are looking pretty good for the new M5 Touring. Back in April, Frank Van Meel, BMW M CEO, posted a teaser picture of the M5 Touring on his Instagram. And since then, I've probably been messaged 1,000 times asking, am I going to change or upgrade my M3 Touring to an M5 Touring? The short answer is no, and I'll get into that a little bit more towards the back end of the video. These are going into production around November time, so I'm sure we'll start seeing them in showrooms and roads very early in 2025. And as with so many modern BMW designs, I can't wait to see one of these in motion on the road, because love or hate the styling, which we're going to get onto, they always look better on the road. Example, the G87 M2. In the studio and stills, it's not everyone's cup of tea. I call it the Lego car, but when you actually see it on the move, especially at a track day or something, it looks like it means business, and let's face it, that's what BMW M is all about. Before we talk about styling and aesthetics, let's talk about colours. This particular car is a beautiful Isle of Man green. Interior-wise, it's Kyalami orange with black merino leather. There's about 10 different external paint colour options at time of launch, and I'm sure that would change through its life cycle. And interior-wise, there's 4 different colours at time of launch. So we've got the Kyalami with black, we've got red with black, we've got Silverstone, which is a personal favourite, and we've got all black, maybe if you're using this as your family car, probably the most practical colour. And in terms of wheel options, again, there's 3 at time of launch. They're staggered, so you've got 20 and 21 inch on the rear axle, very similar to the M3 and the M4, except they're 19s and 20s. That helps with handling dynamics, and I think it also helps with ride quality, because as you can probably see, these tyres have got quite a nice chunky sidewall. I'm a big fan of chunky sidewalls. As much as we all love our low profile tyres, chunky sidewalls usually mean better ride quality. Talking of tyres, well, the cars that we tried out in Germany and Austria were fitted with Michelin's brand new S5 tyres. Compared to the regular 5 Series, it's definitely more aggressive. There's more intakes, as you'd expect. There's the iconic glow kidney grille, which does look pretty cool, especially when it's paired up to the brand new LED headlights. I believe the laser lights, like with the 3 Series and the 4 Series, are getting pushed to one side. Moving back from the nose, well, the front axle is actually 7.5 centimeters wider than the regular 5 Series, which is already a very wide car. So this is going to look awesome out on the road, but it's going to be pretty tricky to pilot down one of your local A and B roads. And I think that's one thing that's definitely worth considering when you're looking at one of these. If you're comparing it to something like the M3, which is somewhat narrower, the rear axle is also 5 centimeters wider. And in fact, when we get back here, I'm delighted to see that we have this lovely little lip behind the rear doors, essentially the rear wing. That to me is very M3, and it just makes all the difference with this car's stance when it's on the road. It just makes it look better. It makes it look more meaningful. M5s of old have always been relatively subtle. Those that know will know. If you took the badge off the boot of this car, you would only really know it as an M5 if you're a proper enthusiast. Otherwise, it just looks like a sporty, regular 5 Series Touring, and to me, that's exactly what you want. You want it to fly under the radar to a certain extent, but you also want your car friends to recognize it as an M5, and I think they've got this recipe just right. This particular car has steel brakes, 6 piston calipers on the front axle, single piston on the rear, very similar to what's in the M3 and M4, but I believe the discs are slightly bigger. In terms of roof options, well, there are some, unlike the M3 Touring. So this particular car, believe it or not, you won't see it on the camera, has a glass pan roof. It doesn't open, but it's got a blind that opens and lets that all-important light in. So again, if you are using one of these as a family car, make sure you get the glass roof, because it just makes the cabin and the interior feel a lot nicer, as we'll discover shortly. Very different to the saloon. That comes with the glass pan roof as standard, and you have to option in the carbon roof on the saloon, because the saloon's going to be a bit lighter. It's going to be a bit more of a driver-focused machine, as you'd expect. While we're talking about that, and before we get around the back of the car, we haven't had any confirmed weights on this car at time of recording, but I'm going to estimate that it weighs about 100 kilos more than the saloon, so just over 2.5 tons, maybe 2.53, 2.54, and then we get to the back of the car. This is what we want to talk about. This is what we want to see, because let's face it, it's an M5 Touring, and this is the touring bit. And in fact, from the C-pillar forwards, this car is essentially the same as the saloon. There's a lot more under-bracing going on underneath, I've been assured, and that's where a lot of that guessing 100 kilos weight comes from, because unlike the saloon, it's not quite as stiff a shell, so they have to make up for that in other areas. In terms of styling, I love it around the back. I think it looks spot on. It has these slightly awkward reflectors that we first saw on the G87 M2, but I think they look better on the M5 than they do on the M2. But otherwise, everything else looks great. This spoiler on the top of the boot looks fabulous. The diffuser looks good. You've got the trademark quad exhaust pipes. And down here, well, that's a fog light, which is pretty cool. I guess that kind of is similar to a rain light in F1. What I am a little bit concerned about is that area there looks like it's already maybe set up for one of those horrible M Performance exhausts. But it does have a very big and usable boot. I believe it's about 500 litres with the seats folded up. and about 1,700 litres with the rear seats folded flat. There's a tiny bit of underfloor storage in here. You've got your sort of luggage net and a few other bits and pieces, but not much, and that's because, well, this is a hybrid, so there's a lot of stuff just underneath that boot floor that takes up some of the room that maybe was once there. You've also got to think about the charging cables, but thankfully it's not fully electric, so they're not a necessity. You can leave them at home or take them on longer road trips when you think that you might need them. Now we're around the front end. This is where the heart of the M5 is. Remember, it's an M hybrid, as BMW call it. The combustion engine is an S68, which is a 4.4 litre V8 twin turbo. It's already made appearances in a few road cars, namely the X5M, the X6M. It's also in the X7 M60i. And of course, it's in the XM. And the XM and this car are fairly similar in terms of their overall running gear, but the performance figures and the way it's all packaged is slightly different. The engine alone produces 585 horsepower and 750 newton meters of torque. That to me might be a small giveaway that there will be a different version down the track, because I know that this is capable of a lot more than 585 horsepower. Alongside the combustion engine, we have an electric motor that produces 197 horsepower. When you combine all of that together, it produces a maximum output of 727 horsepower, but more importantly, because it weighs 2.5 tons, is the torque figure. And that is 1,000 Newton meters, which is just a ridiculous amount. The electric motor, from my understanding, is actually inside the gearbox itself. So I can imagine that in terms of the way the hybrid system works, it's hopefully going to be very seamless, just like it is in the XM. It's amazing how 1 minute you're in electrical energy only, the next minute you're electric and combustion engine together. And the way that all integrates and is calibrated is very, very good. In terms of the gearbox, well, it is essentially a ZF 8-speed, but more complicated, as we just talked about. And all that power and torque is fed to the ground via BMW's M xDrive system. And I think this is going to have no issues getting off the line come rain or shine. In terms of performance figures, well, I don't have the exact figures with me at time of filming, but I know the Saloon will do a claimed 0 to 62 in 3.5 seconds and go on to a top speed of 189 miles an hour with the optional MMM driver's pack. So I'm sure this is going to be very similar to that. I reckon you could probably add a tenth, 3.6 seconds, and maybe knock off 1 or 2 miles an hour to that top speed. I think, in short, it's going to be fast enough for the majority of people. Let's bring it back to that hybrid conversation, though. You can run this in electrical energy only. It has an 18.6 kilowatt hour battery that gives it a realistic range on the WLTP cycle of about 40 or 42 miles, which is going to be handy and useful in most situations. If you live in London and you use this to commute around, you can run it in electrical energy only if you need to. And I'm sure, like all of the other BMW hybrids out there, you can charge that battery and hold the charge when you're on the move. You don't necessarily always have to plug it in. It will also do 87 miles an hour when it's in electric mode only. That's fast enough for anywhere in the UK, and in fact, that's roughly the French toll road speed limit. So it's good to know that with electrical energy only, it will keep up with everyday traffic because it's nearly got 200 horsepower, and it will go a reasonable distance, and it will go a reasonable speed. Jumping in here, well, it's a lovely place to be. Driving position, spot on, as you would expect. Loads of headroom. These seats are exceptionally comfortable. They are a hybrid seat, by which I mean they're very similar to the F90 M seat, which was just amazing and is still one of my absolute favourite seats. But they seem to have designed the top half of it slightly different. So it looks different, it looks more modern, but the most important thing is they are just as comfortable and they are just as supportive. Merino leather is standard. In fact, there's a lot of standard equipment in this new M5. We have head-up display, we have Bowers and Wilkins sound system, we have sun protection glass, but there are still a number of options you can add on. And from my understanding, there'll be a comfort pack, there'll be the ultimate pack, which is always pretty hefty in terms of price, and there's a carbon ceramic brake upgrade as well, which I'm guessing is going to be at least £10,000 alone. But in terms of what I'm seeing in front of me, well, this is a lovely new wheel. It's not too fat rim-wise. It feels very similar to the one in my M3. Leather's lovely. We've got a red strip at the top. We've got M1 and M2 buttons, which are now very traditional in modern M cars, where you can save all of your favorite presets. We'll get into those in a second. And we have some lovely carbon paddles, which look slightly different to the ones that are in the M2, M3 and M4. They feel really, really good. We've got the curved display in front of us with operating system 8.5, so essentially all of the latest and greatest infotainment system, and everything in here is laid out very nice. We've got some shiny carbon fiber trims, which do look really good. We've got Alcantara headlining. Again, I'm not sure if that is standard fit or if that's an optional extra, but it does make this cabin feel very premium and very nice. I remember when I first tried the i5 M60 and I said that the interior in that didn't really match up to the price. When you consider that an i5 M60 is £100,000 base and an M5 saloon is 110, 112 on the road, it just seems insane. When we look down here on the center console, well, it all looks very familiar, but the iDrive controller has an M in the center of it. The start-stop button is red, and we'll press that in a minute. We have an M hybrid button, which gives us a number of different options in terms of how we want the hybrid system to run. We have the M mode, which is road, sport or track. When you're in track, it basically kills all of the unnecessary displays. It deactivates things like pedestrian safety and all the sort of extra braking things that annoy us on the road. You can just shut that all down by going to track. And then we have the setup menu. Once again, this has got even bigger compared to cars like the M3. We have 3 drivetrain options. We have 3 energy recovery options. We have drive logic. We have chassis. We have steering. We have brake. We have 3 different MX drive settings, including 2-wheel drive. So that's a bonus. I can't wait to try that on private land. And we have M sound. As always, I'm running behind time, so I have to wrap this video up. But my first initial impressions and my first look at the new G99 M5 are positive ones. I really do like it. And my biggest surprise from today is hearing what the saloon is going to retail at, because got to remember, I'm filming this at the beginning of June, way before that car has even come out, let alone the M5 Touring. So I'm sure by the time this hits the road, it's going to be around £115,000, including on-road costs. And it's a lot of money, but this is a lot of car. It's going to tick a lot of boxes, and I think it's hopefully going to persuade some people that like their big fast SUVs, even if they are cars like the wonderful X5M, well, they might consider one of these down the track. And the last thing to do is fire this beast up. The car's only done 12 miles, it's not been running. It was delivered a couple of days ago to BMW UK, and we're in a white studio, so I can't go crazy in terms of revving, but I thought I needed to do that for you lot and for my benefit. I've obviously heard what the saloon sounds like, but the Touring always sounds a bit different, especially on the move, because, well, you have a different amount of space there, and the exhaust seems to vibrate through the cabin a bit more and give you a little bit more organic sound. Let's just make sure we're in the right settings. So Sport Plus and the drivetrain, and M sound is on. Now I just put my foot on the brake and press the button. We know that the S68 isn't the best sounding V8 out there. I'd have to give that to Audi's 4-litre V8. That definitely sounds a little bit better. I can't wait to drive one of these in a long time from now, probably 4 or 5 months at least. But hopefully this video, this first look, has given you guys and girls a nice insight to the G99. Thanks a lot for tuning in. I'll see you at the next one.